Hello, everybody. This is your favorite Bronze Age Spider-Man podcast. This is Here Comes the Spider-Cast. This is your co-host, Mike-EL. And as always, I'm joined by...
Joshua Murr-VELL. And today we're going to be looking at Spider-Man comics from July of 1982. And we're going to start off with Amazing Spider-Man number 230, then move on to Marvel Team Up 119, and finish things off with Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man number 68.
Right, and this week's Amazing is the conclusion of the classic two-parter in which Spider-Man faces off against the Juggernaut, right?
Right.
And let's start off with this really cool cover. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, it's really good. We get this back shot of Spider-Man as he's swinging, and he's in full color, full shaded, and in the background we have this really textured black and white close-up of Juggernaut's face. He's got this really intense look. His teeth are gritting and his eyes are bloodshot, and he's huge in frame. And the fact that he's black and white and has a lot of texture to him, and there's this really poppy comic style Spider-Man over top of him, it really makes this this cover stand out.
Right, and this is pre-Photoshop, so there's some kind of inking technique that they're using to give it kind of it's not Zipatone. I don't know what this is, but there's almost
it could have been. What it is? It could have been even painted on a clear, a plastic, and then put over top of this drawing.
Ah, there you go. Okay.
And then probably everything was probably done that way. Everything was probably inked on a clear plastic piece of paper and then put over top of this traditionally inked, or not inked, but I don't know, because it looks very different. It's two very distinct styles, and it looks like the Spider-Man is on top of the drawing of Juggernaut. Absolutely. Here. So
and also look at the web. The web is not your typical ink, black inked web. It's blue, just color. So you're right. There's something going on here where it's at least it's two different layers for sure. Mm-hmm. It's really cool though. I love it.
Yeah,
anyway,
I really even the red webbing above, in the logo. It just pops out so much more now that it's on this black and white photo. It's really cool.
Right. And we have to point out that cover is by John Romita Jr. and Al Milgrom. So yeah, that's a great cover. Interiors are by John Romita Jr. and Jim Mooney. And of course, the story as usual is by Roger Stern, our favorite current Spidey writer. Well, current at this time anyway. Right. So here we go, to fight the unbeatable foe. Sorry, were you going to say something?
I was going to say this beginning is really great. The first page, splash page, is a nice quick way to kind of recap what happened last episode and or last issue, not last episode. And there's some really great dynamic poses going on, both in the flashbacks and Spider-Man running along the wall. It's such a great splash page. And then even the next page, there's so many dynamic poses that Spider-Man is in, swinging through the city. Yeah. Even the one where, even that first panel where he's just jumping from building to building, and it's a far away shot, so he's drawn really tiny, but that might be one of the most dynamic poses on the page.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
It's really good.
I actually noticed with this issue, starting with the very first page, that I think John Romita Jr.'s figures, at least with Spider-Man, are in this issue he's experimenting more with foreshortening and perspective, where the anatomy, it's not just a posed straight on shot. You can see that his leg is kind of getting a little bit bigger as it comes towards you, and the other one's a little bit smaller. And then on page 2, he's really experimenting, I think, with the anatomy, and it's really cool.
Yeah, and it's done really well, so it's beautiful. It looks really great.
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then so we pick up where we left off last time, which is that the Juggernaut spent the entire issue last week rampaging through New York trying to get to Madam Web. Then when he got to her, he ripped her out of her whatever cybernetic chair and then realized that she was useless. So therefore he's like, oh, well, she's no use to me. So then turned around and now he's walking back, right?
So we catch up with Juggernaut walking back. That's
right.
Pretty much where we catch up with them. It's such a cool story because again we have Juggernaut kind of just wanting to mind his own business and walking through the city, and by doing so he's creating this chaos and mayhem everywhere around him, and Spider-Man is just trying to stop him, and Juggernaut really doesn't care for Spider-Man, doesn't really pay any mind to him, and continues on his way.
Right. And so basically the whole issue is Spider-Man coming up with different ideas of how to stop Juggernaut. It almost becomes like a Coyote Roadrunner cartoon.
Yeah,
where
it's very Looney Tunes.
It's just one, right? It's just one thing after another, and they all fail, right?
Mm-hmm.
So first, Spider-Man tries to use his webbing as like a bow and arrow to project a steel I-beam, right? Like shoot it at the Juggernaut, but he catches it, crumples it up, and just tosses it, right? So that didn't work. Then Juggernaut smashes through like a wooden fence, and Spider-Man is on the side of this building, this condemned building, and Juggernaut just walks up and just rips the entire corner of the building off, including like several floors worth, right? Of brick, and just tosses it. It's great. Then Spider-Man uses a
wrecking ball.
What is it now? Right, then he uses a wrecking ball, and it just, Juggernaut just knocks it aside. So then it's like, okay, well, what's next? So then the wrecking ball smashes through that same building, and Spider-Man, his spider sense goes off, so he knows that something bad's gonna happen. So the building starts to crumble, but there's these like, I don't know if this is like sewer piping or what, but this gigantic piping.
Right.
So Spider-Man jumps into one of those for cover, and basically the building collapses all around him, but he's somewhat safe inside these pipes. So, eventually it says here, and 20 minutes later, he crawls out. But it's funny because as he's coming out, he's like, oh, I almost feel sorry for the Juggernaut. He never had a chance. And then it's like, and then as he's crawling out, one of the construction workers is like, geez, then both of them survived. Spider-Man's like, what? Did you say both of them? And it turns out that as soon as the building collapsed, he just walked off, right? So it had no effect on him. It's amazing.
I love that path too. Like it cuts from, what? Did you say both of them? And like the next panel is all of this like destruction on the ground, and then there's like a clear path where Juggernaut just continued walking and pushed everything around him.
Right.
It's such great storytelling through the panel. Even without that dialogue, you could tell that he continued through. Like there's a line and like a clear passage through the rubble, and then it leads directly to the fence that's been torn down. So you know that he continued even through that fence to keep walking. It's so good. I really love the storytelling, and I love seeing Spider-Man come up with these things on the spot and kind of improvise how to stop him. It's really good. And then the next thing that happens is like such a crazy escalation. But there is, we do catch up with some characters from the Daily Bugle first before we jump over to that.
Right. Yeah, first we touch base with Betty Brant and Glory. I can't remember Glory's last name.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
But we touch base with them. I just want to point out there's a really cool shot of the layout of the Bugle on Digital 9 that's really cool. You just kind of see them. You see this couple coming. Who is it? Is it Lance?
It's
Bennett
Lance
and his girlfriend.
Yeah,
and his girlfriend, right? Just a nice shot of like the layout of the, because that's something a lot of, I don't want to say image style artists, but a lot of later artists wouldn't bother doing. But it's just nice to see the geography of the office. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And so Lance and his girlfriend are getting into a fight, and then basically, so then J. Jonah is hold on, I think is he sending him back on assignment? Yeah, basically to get over to the Hudson River because they know what's going on with Spider-Man the Juggernaut. We cut over to Black Tom Cassidy, who's actually the person that originally sent Juggernaut on this mission.
Right.
He's kind of just watching with binoculars or whatever.
Yeah, he's waiting for Juggernaut to return.
Right. And so basically, yeah. So then we jump back to Spider-Man, and you wanted to talk about this scene, right? Spider-Man and Juggernaut.
Yeah. So quickly we see Spider-Man jump onto a big 18-wheeler truck that's holding gasoline, and he takes the truck and he rams it into the Juggernaut, and there's this huge explosion.
Yeah,
it's gigantic.
This page is awesome, but this is so cool. The truck's driving towards him. This won't hurt me. Nothing can. Boom! It's so cool.
It's so great. Yeah, those close up of his eyes, and then cutting out to the truck exploding, and it's more than half the page, 2/3 of the page is just this giant explosion, and this truck in the middle. We don't even see Juggernaut. And then afterwards, on the next page, we see kind of the aftermath of it, and we see fire and gasoline everywhere. Well,
it's also great. I just got to point out that I'm so glad they didn't add a sound effect, because they could have done a kablam, whatever. But nope, they just left it, and I appreciate that, because we didn't need it.
Right.
But anyway, yeah. Sorry, you were gonna say?
And then we see Black Tom Cassidy kind of watching it, so we get his perspective, and there's this really cool panel where he's looking at the flame, so you're looking at him, and you can see the reflection of the explosion and the fire in his binoculars. Yep. And then Spider-Man looks from his cover, and he's looking at the explosion, and then his eyes go wide, and we just see this silhouette of a man stand up in the middle of the explosion. It's such a cool few panels. I love this. That last panel on Digital 15, Original 14 is so good. I love it.
Yes. It reminds me of Terminator 2. Remember that?
Yeah.
When he comes out of the fire, it's and we know that Jim Cameron is a comic book fan, so who knows, maybe he read this issue, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, this is great. And then, of course, no, it's impossible. He couldn't have. So, yeah, he comes out of the fire, and then he walks out, and as he's walking, he knocks over a fire hydrant. And then we see, whoosh, hiss, the water's all steaming.
Right.
And he's like, Spider-Man, you're dead. I love that.
So
good. And then I love this. You don't waste words, do you? No, I don't kid around either, so laugh while you can. At this point, the Juggernaut is frightening. I'm scared. I'm reading this comic going, oh, my God, he's going to kill him, right? So then so Spider-Man leaps out of the way and jumps onto him and grabs him by the helmet, right? And he's trying to take off the helmet, but it doesn't work. So then he's like, okay. He's like, I got an idea. Oh, and I also like the fact that they show him up against this orange brick wall. At first I thought, I wonder why they put so much emphasis on him being towards the wall. But I think the key is that they wanted the readers to know that Juggernaut wasn't sure where he was going, because, as we know on the next page, what happens is he's on his back. Juggernaut is tearing at his costume, ripping his costume off, but he keeps walking. Look at the storytelling.
Right.
We see the Juggernaut getting.
I think that the reason why there's a close up of the wall is because in the last issue he walks through the building and Spider-Man gets knocked off. Okay. Right. So that's why he covers up Juggernaut's eyes, and that's what makes him fall into the cement later on.
Wait, don't spoil it.
Oh, sorry.
So what happens is on the next page, we see Juggernaut going down, and they're struggling, but in each panel he's getting lower and lower and lower. Wait, what's going on? Oh, we cut to a wide shot. Spider-Man has tricked him. He's like, Spider-Man, huh? Well, how about that? Congratulations, Stumblefoot. You slogged right into a recently poured foundation of wet cement. And that's it. Spider-Man jumps off. He's like, what do you mean? Come back here. And then Juggernaut starts to sink. You think this will hold me? Well, you're wrong. I'm the Juggernaut. I smash cement. Wet cement, Juggy. You're like a man in quicksand. And then Juggernaut just sinks down and down and down until we see his hand, and then he's gone.
So
Spider-Man has outsmarted him. It's excellent. After 2 issues, he finally figured out a way to defeat him. Isn't that great?
Yeah, it's such great storytelling through those panels. Like you were saying, with the slowly sinking. And I was like, what's going on? And then once I got to the end of the page, I was like, oh my God, that is so clever. It's such a great way to tell that story. And then going back to the whole James Cameron thing with T2, we get that moment of Juggernaut slowly sinking into the cement, and you're left with his hand reaching up. That's right.
That's right.
So we almost get that thumbs up moment. which is kind of fun. So that's really interesting. I wonder if this is one of the issues that James Cameron read before coming up with Terminator T2.
Right. Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Anyway, so then Peter Parker actually leaves and goes back to the Daily Bugle. He's all beat up, but he submits his pictures to J. Jonah Jameson or to Robbie Robertson because he realized that his camera had been going off during the fight, and so we see some photos of the Juggernaut, and it's funny because Robertson actually points out, he's like, they're awfully grainy. Looks like they were shot through gauze or something. But of course, we know they were taken through Spider-Man's costume because that's where he keeps his camera on his belt, right? So it's funny. So, just kind of a funny little episode there.
Right.
Then we cut over to, so where is this now? So Spider-Man goes to the hospital. Oh, yeah, to visit Madam Web.
Right.
And she is alive, but she's not in good shape. So Peter's all upset. So then we cut over to Black Tom Cassidy's boat, and he's like, watching through the binoculars. He's like, surely, he's talking about the Juggernaut, surely he can dig his way out from under a few thousand tons of cement. Sure he can. Any second now. I know he can. Can't he? And then we just see the quicksand and the wall and the police, the little sign there, construction, and that's it. And then it just says, the question goes unanswered for now. Isn't that great?
It's nice so good. And I love that those 4 panels are almost like a panning out shot where it starts close up on the cement and then you slowly zoom out and you're actually just looking at a hole in the fence, like you're looking through it, and it kind of cuts all the way through to see the police barricade holding up. Like it's so great. The storytelling is so fantastic in this issue, and I think that it's a mixture between John Romita Jr.'s great like panels and the way that he lays out everything and how he can tell a story just through the art, and also the fact that this story is so simple and self-contained, and you don't need all this extra fluff to like stuff into the story to make it like somewhat interesting. It's just a small like little story that they wrote, and Roger Stern wrote, and that's it. Like it's so good. It doesn't have to add all this extra stuff in that a lot of the other issues have to do. Like with Marvel Team Up, a lot of the times we see like just things happening for no reason.
Oh, I know. And also panels of exposition and dialogue that you just don't want to read, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So this issue was so good. I highly recommend this one.
It's funny because I actually read it as a kid and I did like it, but now rereading it as an adult, I like it more. I appreciate it more. And I can see why it's a classic. So obviously you and I both recommend this. This is a great Spider-Man story. Excellent. All right. Yeah. Now it's on to Marvel Team Up. So Marvel Team Up. 119, Spider-Man and the Gargoyle.
Right.
I got to say, surprisingly, this issue was better than average.
Yeah.
What did you think?
I was actually thinking the same thing. I was so surprised at how much I enjoyed this one. So I haven't read much with Gargoyle.
I've barely read anything. Yeah. I don't know much about him.
Neither do I. We do get a little bit of a backstory with him here.
Sure.
I guess we'll start off with talking about the cover. It's okay. It's fine, I think.
So it's Kerry Gamble and Joe Rubenstein. So Kerry Gamble did the interiors.
Right.
And are you familiar with Kerry Gamble at all?
No, not really.
Okay, I mostly know him from Superman. He did Superman in the late 80s. But he also did some, like, I think, Power Man and Iron Fist. So he's kind of just, I always thought of him as kind of just a standard superhero artist. But in this issue, contrasted with Herb Trimpe, whom we all love, but he's a pretty freaking good comic artist.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I really like the art in this one.
Right. I think the cover's okay. Yeah, but I think
fine.
The interiors are definitely improving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we start off this issue with Gargoyle and Spider-Man swinging through the city, and they're catching up after their recent fight, like through these dimensional portals with the Defenders, which we haven't seen. At least I haven't read, and we didn't discuss
we'll have to add it to our. We'll have to add it to our list of reviews in the future where we catch up on the crossover.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So they're kind of chatting, and we get kind of a nice little moment with Gargoyle and Spider-Man being able to just chill out for a little while and chat. And he tells Spider-Man his backstory and how he, was turned into a gargoyle when he made a deal with this demon.
Yeah.
And I think it was to save his family. I can't quite remember.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I don't quite remember either. He tried to kill himself at one point, but then
it's the town. He wanted to save his town.
Yeah. It's a bizarre origin and it's a bizarre character, and honestly, I don't know if he really was around much after the 80s. So I always associate him with the time period in comics just before I started reading, because I never came across him when I was reading comics as a kid, so.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So
and then from there,
and we kind of get a little bit too about how he was depressed and didn't want to be the gargoyle anymore, and even him being old, like he didn't think that he had any life left, and he wanted to kill himself. But after he got into a fight with the Null, his family started talking to him in his spirits, which kind of brought him back. So it's kind of cheesy, but it ties into the story pretty well, I thought. I think that
it's fine.
this I think this character was a perfect choice for this story. Maybe the story was kind of created from the character, but and Spider-Man actually feels like he belongs in this story too. In a way, yeah. Yeah, well, we'll get to that later, but it's definitely not just them stuck together. Like, the fact that it continues over from Defenders kind of makes it work, I think, because we don't have to make up an excuse for why they're together. Right.
So that's kind of cool.
I mean, even if we didn't have that knowledge of them, the fact that they are just coming back from that mission or whatever, just having them kind of swing through the city and just chat and catch up almost as old friends completely works for me, because it feels real, and it's just two people chatting and getting to know each other.
Right.
So then afterwards, when they go their separate ways and their story intertwines again, it's not so jarring as to why Spider-Man is even there. It kind of makes sense and feels right. So anyways, they're kind of their hang sesh is interrupted when these guys start mugging this old lady, and Gargoyle and Spider-Man go and stop him, and Gargoyle helps the old lady back to her house, where she makes him some tea, and they start chatting, and her daughter comes in and starts yelling at her that she needs to make a new appointment for the doctor, and she's just really not interested. She's extremely sick, and she's ready to just go. And it's kind of internal family struggle with the daughter not being ready to let go, and her kind of being ready and knowing that she's just too sick, and fighting is just kind of painful at this point, which is a very real subject and kind of tough and a lot to handle in a comic book for kids, right?
And it's funny because and I just wonder, the fact that this issue is so much better, how much of it is that the writing is better and how much of it is that it's a different artist? Because it just seems like everything works. It almost makes me think that, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to put all the blame on Herb Trimpe, but it's his art, or at least the style he was using at that time, and the inks by Mike Esposito have just made the art too. It's I love Jack Kirby, but it's almost like an exaggeration of Jack Kirby in a bad way. It was just too abstract. But then looking at this issue, like these scenes of Gargoyle just sitting drinking tea, it just looks, I don't want to say realistic, but it looks far more realistic than we've seen from Herb Trimpe.
I can feel it. I look at it and I can tell that this character is like alive. If that makes any sense, like the way that it's drawn is there's just so much life in the character, and even though even though he's just sitting there eating a cookie,
right?
It's just there's so much character in it. And I think it's really great and definitely helps with the storytelling because
I agree.
It's such a weird idea. Like if you told me last week that the next issue we were going to be reading was going to be about this monster called the Gargoyle sitting down with an old lady eating cookies and drinking tea, I would be like, great, it's going to be our worst issue yet.
Right? But it's great.
But it really works.
Absolutely.
So after this, we catch up with Peter Parker, and he goes to the retirement home to visit Aunt May, and she's crying because Nathan has run away, her fiance. And when we catch up with him, he's kind of going around the city with one of the nurses, I believe, or the attendants at the nursing home. And he's kind of going around and reminiscing about his old life and how a lot of his friends who are now dead, him and his friends used to be in plays, or it was vaudeville, right? They would do like they would like go on stage and sing, and so he goes to the theater and goes to a bunch of the old places he used to go to, and then from there he's jumped in the street. Yeah,
they basically get mugged. It's kind of an awkward scene because he's with this nurse guy or whatever he is, and then he's talking, and he turns around, and then all of a sudden you see a hand holding a knife, and the guy's like, "Your little boy took off on you, old man, when we showed him this, and now we've got a few things to show you." So apparently the nurse just took off.
Yeah, we don't see Jose leave.
I think it's just awkward storytelling.
Yeah, he's just kind of gone.
Right. So what happens next?
So this is such a great little scene that happens next. We see the mother and daughter fighting again and still kind of arguing about whether the mom should be going to the hospital to get more tests done or what she should be doing. And the Gargoyle asks them to take his hand. And on page... Oh, I don't have the page numbers.
It's is it digital 14 when he
probably when he jumps out the window? Yeah, it's such a great page. Cool. At the top of the page, we have Gargoyle's hand, and he says, "Will you fly?" And then the next one is the mother reaching out, tentative, uncertain. And then the next one is the daughter. They reach, and then it's a shot of him kind of like halfway out the window, and he has their hands, and he jumps, and we see the silhouette of them flying and in the moon through the city, and it's just great. It's so good. And then it's like this great like time that the Gargoyle gives the mother and daughter to spend with each other and do all of these things that they really didn't get the chance to do, or that they have always loved doing. They kind of get to see this side of New York they haven't seen before. They fly around the Statue of Liberty. There's this great... Sorry, go ahead.
So, no, I was going to say, I also got to point out, this isn't like a Superman Lois Lane romantic thing, right? No. That's what makes it kind of cool, is that it's this older woman and then her daughter, and it's just kind of it's a cool moment. It's something you don't see every day in a comic book, in a superhero comic book. Sorry, but you were going to say...
It gives the mother one last time to kind of bond and spend with her daughter. Right. And then it also gives the daughter some time to kind of accept that the mom is ready to go and is not doing well. And it's just this great moment for them to like bond and be together and kind of forget everything that's going on. And it's so great. There's this great panel afterwards too of them flying and they're holding hands.
Yes.
It's very, very good.
Yeah, it's great.
So
I think it's clearly this is the best story we've read from J.M. DeMatteis.
For sure.
This is great.
Honestly, this makes me kind of want to explore Gargoyle a little bit.
Yeah, I never knew anything about him, and I kind of just thought he was a generic monster. But yeah, you're right. It's just they make him so three-dimensional as a character. Right. I do want to read more.
He honestly kind of reminds me of The Thing, And like
Right,
not necessarily
absolutely.
the way he looks, but the way he acts. Like the thing is this big
Sure.
orange rock monster, but a lot of the things that he goes through are like really emotional, and there's definitely some times where we
Sure.
get like a good look at the like what the monster is feeling, which is so great and
Absolutely.
like a nice juxtaposition of what we would normally get or what the norm is for these big monsters, like with the
Sure.
Hulk. You know, it's
Right, right.
just about smashing and him going on a rampage, and he's a monster, right? So, kind of
Right.
getting to look inside and see what the monster is thinking and how they feel on a day-to-day basis is so great.
Right. This is more interesting. Yeah.
Oh, for
yeah,
sure.
Definitely a good character.
Yeah,
For sure. So then we get back to they're kind of like terrorizing Nathan Lubinsky.
right.
But then Spider-Man, he I don't know how he finds where they are, but he somehow knows where they are.
I think
and then he
Aunt
comes
May
in-
talks about how he had been reminiscing about his old friends and how he was sad. He was recently sad because one of his friends who he used to sing with just passed away. So I think that's what ticked him
Sure.
off.
Okay, and it's
Tipped him off.
cool because he sort of intervenes, but he doesn't show himself, and so they're kind of bullying Nathan in his wheelchair and everything, and then Spider-Man shows himself, so they all get scared and they take off, but Nathan and Aunt May think it's them that scared them off.
Right.
So it's kind of funny because like Aunt May shows up with her umbrella and starts hitting the guys, and then actually I forgot about this part. Nathan actually does use his wheelchair to knock a couple of the guys out of the way, so they actually are fighting back.
Right.
But then they see Spider-Man hanging above them, and that's what makes them take off. But Aunt May and Nathan don't realize that, so it's kind of a cool scene.
Yeah, it's really great. I also love the reveal of Aunt May. Is we see Spider-Man like tie a bunch of these guys up and kind of knock them down. And then we see the last panel on the page is Spider-Man saying, "That's it, punk. You just bought yourself a web full of trouble." And then we see a close-up of Nathan almost about to get punched. And we see this bubble kind of come into frame saying, "Let him go." And it's going off the panel, and then the next one is Aunt May standing there on stage. It's a kind of a nice surprise. I wasn't expecting her to show up and kind of take out a couple of these guys.
Right, and it's in the old days they used to portray Aunt May as kind of helpless, and
Right.
also I've talked about this before, but I don't really like it when they age superheroes. And one of the things is that at this point Aunt May is living in a retirement home. And I don't remember if it's this issue or Spectacular where she tells Peter that she wants to buy the apartment that they all used to live in, right? Or buy the
Right.
building and turn it into like a senior home or whatever it's called. So that's kind of I like that. Because they kind of, it's almost like she had 1 foot half in the grave for the entire 60s and 70s, and now they're kind of trying to make her a little bit younger and more spry again, which I like, So it's kind of cool. So yeah, basically, so then the hooligans take off, and then we cut back to the scene of the Gargoyle and the mother and the daughter, right? And then the mother's flashing back. We get some nice scenes of her growing up on this like farm or whatever it is, right?
Right.
And then, that's it. She's gone. She dies.
Right. It's this really kind of powerful couple of panels too, where their Gargoyle and her daughter are both holding her hands, and she slowly lets go, and then it's just this long bird's eye view shot of her in the bed and the two of them kind of standing around her.
Right.
It's really great. And then
and this is
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and this is where now I'm starting to remember and be reminded why I've always thought that he's such a good writer, right? Because he did Kraven's Last Hunt and Justice League International and all these great comics. So yeah, like this is now he's just developing as a writer, I guess.
Yeah, and the way that this issue ends too, on this quiet moment where Spider-Man and Gargoyle meet up again, and rather than catching up and like telling each other what just happened, they decide that they just want to sit quietly together for a little while.
It's great. I love
it's so good. So I was so shocked at how much I liked this issue. It wasn't
Yes,
like,
me
I don't
too.
think it was fantastic by any means, but I think that it was just like a nice, like, quiet, almost like it's just a character study
Right.
rather than this big action
Right.
scene. Like, I don't even think that. I think that was actually my least favorite part, was when the thugs showed up and stole, like, kidnapped Nathan. I think,
Right, because it felt shoved in there.
yeah, and it's just like, well, we need action. It's a comic book, and I think it honestly would have been so much stronger without that. Maybe there could have been some, like, there could have been like a parallel heart-to-heart moment with Nathan, where
Right.
he's thinking his life is over, and Spider-Man is there saying that you're just because you're old doesn't mean that your life is over. There's still a lot to live for. And then Gargoyle is kind of talking with the mother and daughter, saying, like, you put up a great fight, but if you're ready to go, it's your time to go, right? So it could have been this nice, like, parallel, and we do kind of get that. I think it's just that we don't get much of a moment
Sure.
where we see Aunt May and Nathan, or even Peter, talking to him about it.
Right, and the thing is that it is kind of a strange issue because, as you said earlier, it feels like Spider-Man actually belongs in this story. But the funny thing is they spend most of the issue not even together. So it is kind of it's a bizarre way to tell us the story, and it could have worked better, like you said, if they made the two stories kind of parallel each other a little bit better.
Yeah.
But it still is a cool issue,
Oh yeah.
and it feels more like the classic Spider-Man that I remember as a kid. It's just more like that.
Yeah.
So, and it's actually funny because the issue after this, I won't spoil it yet, but I did have the issue after this as a kid.
Okay.
But it was one of those rare issues that I sold. So I must have not loved it as much as I loved my other Spider-Man comics.
Right.
But we'll talk about that next week. So yeah. So anyway, so this issue, Marvel Team Up number 119, I recommend it. It's definitely something I would read again.
Yeah. Yeah. I also recommend it.
Right, and we, as we said, it made us both interested in the Gargoyle. So
Yeah,
that's
which
quite the
is
accomplishment.
something I
Yep.
don't think I'd ever say.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So that brings us to Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man 68, with a cover that features a giant close-up of a character called Robot Master's face, and it says, "Vengeance," cries the Robot Master.
Right.
Do you know anything about the Robot Master?
No, nothing.
I don't know anything. I believe, yeah, I've definitely read his first appearance, but other than that, I don't really know much about him.
Right. I think this cover's pretty cool.
Yeah.
There's I don't know if it was supposed to be, but I feel like this robot that he's fighting is very like Steve Ditko Quantum Realm looking.
Okay. Yeah,
like,
yeah, you can say
like
that.
I can picture like a tiny Doctor Strange standing on the edge of it.
Right.
With the, like those
point.
big bubbles and the round tubes spiking out, and like the Ditko like bubbles everywhere. Like
Right.
the robot just
Yeah.
kind of gave me those vibes.
Right.
So I was kind of interested in seeing that. So that kind of grabbed me right away.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, and you know what? I love how it opens up with
Yeah.
basically like these little tiny panels, which I always love. The grid format, the classic way, the classic form of storytelling. Again, Steve Ditko-esque, of this man running down a street, looking over his shoulder. Something's going on. He's on the phone, and then we see these little robot. I don't know what they are, but these little robot, like, they kind of look like how would you describe those? Like little screws almost, but they have wings on
Right.
them, and they come out of his ear and then fly into the telephone, and then basically it just cuts away. So we're not quite sure what's going on yet, right? But then we cut over to a scene that was actually referenced in Marvel Team Up, implying that this happens before Marvel Team Up, but that's okay. In which Peter and May are visiting the grave of Ben Parker, right? So I guess this is something they do every year. But anyway, so we get the title here. The title here: "Hell hath no fury like a robot scorned." So nice little splash page here.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
I really love these kind of like prologues that they've been doing with
Sure.
Spectacular Spider-Man. It really feels like you get like a little bit of the story before they jump in. Like it's really to grab you and make you want to know what's going on, and this definitely works for me. I know they've done it before with like the one that sticks out is Boomerang killing that informant working for Kingpin. And then we jump into the issue after that. We get the title after all of that happens. So it really just pushes you right into the action.
It's like a pre-credit sequence in a movie.
Right.
You know? It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. So on it, we also have to point out we have a guest artist this issue, Luke McDonnell, instead of Ed Hannigan. So it's a different artist. Luke McDonnell, I think we've come across him before, but I know him mostly from Suicide Squad in the 90s with John Ostrander.
Right.
So yeah, definitely fits in with, I mean, he's not quite as good. I mean, I know he's not as good an artist as Ed Hannigan, but it doesn't really stick out as being a fill-in artist. What do you think?
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't really notice at first.
There you go.
It wasn't until partway through I'm like, wait, is this not him? And then I went back and realized it was McDonnell. Right.
So basically, yeah, we get a shot of them reminiscing about Spider-Man's origins. So we have some recreated panels from Amazing Fantasy 15. And then it pretty much just goes from there. So then since Spidey is... so then he leaves he's getting ready to leave the graveyard. He splits off from Aunt May and Nathan Lubinsky. And then he comes across... basically, he's not sure what's going on, but he sees a bunch of guys and a woman in suit and ties beating up this guy, and so he intervenes to help, and he uses his spider powers to fight them off. But it's kind of weird because one of them ends up using this like
this gas almost.
Yeah, like this James Bondian gadget where she opens up like it almost looks like, what is that called? Like a makeup thing?
Mirror.
Right, and then it just shoots out this gas at him, and doesn't really knock him out, but it subdues him so that they're able to get away. And then he's like looking at this guy. He's like, there's something familiar about this guy. But so he basically thinks that he's prevented a guy from getting kind of mugged. But then when he looks down, he finds, of course, one of the guy's wallets has fallen out, and it's the FBI that was actually hassling this guy. So it's kind of like a mystery of what's going on here, right? Then he looks up and he sees that the name on the tomb is Professor Mendel Strom. And he's like, there is no way I could ever forget that name. So then we cut over to another scene. He's like, Mendel Strom. I never thought I'd hear that name again. So he kind of says the same thing again. But then he flashes back and explains the secret origin of Mendel Strom. And this is the Robot Master. So we flash back to Spider-Man 37, a classic story by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, in which we find out that this guy, built this killer, he created these killer robots, and Spider-Man fought him, and then he had a heart attack. And then he later learned that Strom's employer was secretly one of my greatest enemies, a maniac called the Green Goblin. But, anyway, so Peter is so lost in thought that he ends up walking by his friends from Empire State University, including someone who he may or may not have had carnal relations with, but we don't know for sure, right?
Right, yeah.
Marcy Kane, right?
It's so weird. I feel like they must have tried to backtrack with that whole thing, because they really kind of went in the opposite direction, and now I don't really know what's going on with him and Marcy, so that was really weird. It's also like just a weird moment that's added in. I don't think they really even talk about it later on in this issue. I don't think Macy comes back, does she?
No,
Marcy,
I don't
sorry.
think so. Marcy, I don't think so.
But then after that, we catch up with Deb, and we find out that she actually noticed when Peter punched through the Spider-Man vision that he was having and crushed his locker. So that wasn't really revealed last issue. We found out this one that she actually saw him do that. So she's kind of concerned about him, and then Biff kind of comes over and he's mad at Peter for making Deb cry. Right. So he kind of
comes in.
I love this panel. I love what happens. Biff kind of grabs Peter by the scruff of his sweater, and Peter just kind of like flicks him off almost. Like how it's drawn, he's so like it's just like a little.
Well, it's so casual. Like
right.
Yeah, he's so flippant about
nonchalant.
it. And to be honest, Yeah, nonchalant. Like, I don't know if Ed Hannigan or John Romita Jr. would have drawn that scene that way because it seems uncharacteristic of Peter Parker. I don't know. I don't know what you thought, but I mean, it is funny, but it doesn't seem like something Peter would do.
No, it doesn't seem like something he would do.
No. Yeah, and so, yeah. So, I mean, it is funny, but I don't know if it really fits.
Right.
But yeah, so then basically, then he sees the dean again, and the dean convinces him to quit his job as a teacher's assistant, right? So he can focus on his studies. So then it's funny because then he walks outside, and Biff is still recovering, and then Deb's like, "I'll go talk to Peter," and then she chases him up the stairway, and she's like, "I've always suspected that some deep secret kept Peter from ever getting close to me. I must know what it is." And then it cuts to the next shot, and Spider-Man is swinging away on the rooftop. And then she's like, "Spider-Man? It can't be, can it?"
Right.
So obviously planting the seeds for a future mystery, right?
Right. So
or a future developments.
Yeah,
so.
It definitely seems like Deb is kind of catching on. And honestly, I hope that she does find out. Kind of just because I want Deb to finally have like a conclusion and a good story. Like I feel so bad for this character.
Right. Me
so
too,
I definitely want something good to happen to her.
Right. So yeah. So then Spider-Man he tracks down Strom. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's because he goes, "This is the address found in that agent's wallet," but it looks like they've already got company. So now Robot Master has attacked these FBI agents. So he jumps in and sees this robot. This is great. Just like superhero fun. I love it. So he drops in and fights this funny looking robot. And basically then the woman has got like this some kind of device that she's using, and it kind of, deactivates the robot. So then the two guys recover, then they're all talking. And then, so what is it here that they've been tracking Professor Strom? So this is kind of weird because then it gets into some politics where it's like, Spider-Man's like, "But Mendel Strom's dead." And she's like, "Is he Spider-Man? Is he indeed? Then how do you account for the robot drones which terrorists launch against Israel? Or the mental killer that destroyed a mosque in Saudi Arabia?"
Right.
Yeah. So what were we going to say?
Sorry, I think you cut out there, so I thought you had paused, and I was going to say that they also destroyed a mosque in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, okay, yeah. But so it's like, this is kind of interesting because now we're getting into politics. But so basically, they're trying to figure out what's going on. So now these guys suit up into these. I'm not sure if this is like a costume that we've seen before, but it's like a superhero-esque costume.
FBI kind of, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of ridiculous, but we'll forgive it.
It's not quite Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. like soldier. It's kind of leaning more towards a superhero, but it's kind of weird because they're FBI.
So then they go back to the tomb where Strom is. Spider-Man rips off the door. And this is kind of cool because they're trying to figure out what's going on, but then another door slams shut and traps them inside the tomb. And then there's like this explosive device that they were going to set off, right?
They set off, right. And it ends up knocking them all out.
Right.
Except for
even
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man tries to cover it with a web blanket, but it doesn't quite work, and so they all get knocked out.
Right.
He's okay.
This panel, too, with Spider-Man jumping away from the explosion, I absolutely love on original 15, digital 16.
Yeah.
In the middle there, like, we see this like bird's eye view of the explosion. Yeah, we get that Kirby crackle. We get the like great shading on Spider-Man because the explosion behind him, it's just like black and red silhouetted Spider-Man. It's really great. So then, after that, he jumps through the hole that the explosion made, and he realizes that he's actually been transferred into Mendel Strom's like conscious has been transferred into a robot. So he calls himself his son, which is kind of strange, but he's completely a robot now. And he releases a bunch of these strange looking robots on Spider-Man, and it kind of just turns into this big fight where Spider-Man is defeating all these different drones, and then eventually defeats Strom in the end.
Right. Yeah, it kind of just turns into a slugfest for the
Yeah.
last few issues, right?
Yeah.
It's not really spectacular. But, so basically he defeats them all. He reconnects with the FBI agents. And then Robot Master comes back out of the tomb and then is like kind of walking through the graveyard. And then he kind of just falls apart. And then it's the end. And, so not a great ending. Definitely not a great ending.
No.
And to be honest, as I'm going through and looking at the art again, there is a few weak panels.
Yeah.
So overall, not a great issue, but okay. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought it was fine. I don't... It's not that I wouldn't recommend it, but I don't think that it would be something that I would go out and recommend either.
Right.
Right? It's kind of just lukewarm for me. It's like it's an average issue. It doesn't stand out as being fantastic.
Right. I agree.
So
it is possible, like, again, it's, a lot of times we talk about fill-ins. It is possible that, what's his name? Bill Mantlo had a really good story ready, and maybe Ed Hannigan wasn't ready, so maybe he filled this story in just to kind of fill another month. Who knows? We're not sure, but definitely not the greatest issue. Yeah. But next month, I think, is going to be a little bit better because... with Amazing, we've got the return of the character called Cobra and a really cool cover that we'll talk about next week. We've got Murr-VELL team up with Dominic Fortune, which, by the way, I had as a kid, and I pronounced it Dominic Fortune because I don't know why. I was illiterate.
Right.
And then we have the return of Ed Hannigan and the return of Cloak and Dagger. And Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man. So that's going to be a really fun read.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for that.
You can take it from here, Josh.
So I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. You can find us over at the Comic Book Syndicate on Spotify and iTunes and Stitcher, on Facebook. And if you want to follow us on Twitter, you can find us at Comic Syndicate. We'd love to hear from you guys. We want to know what you guys think about the episodes and the issues that we're reading. We want to keep that conversation going. So definitely contact us wherever we can be found. And a review on Apple Podcasts would actually be so great. So, yeah. Yeah,
good point. There you go. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that brings us to the conclusion of this week's episode of your favorite Bronze Age Spider-Man podcast. Until next Monday, this has been Here Comes the Spider-Cast.
All right, see you then.